Well, welcome to the Steel Sports Show, the youth sports podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Martin Brown. Delighted to be joined, as always, by my co-host, Nathan Klinkenbeard. Nathan, how are you?
Doing well, Martin. Doing well. How are you? It's good to be with you again.
Yeah, it's good. Trying to get through this exceptionally cold winter in the Northeast here. Some more snow last night, and keeps seems to be getting colder and colder. But so really can't wait for spring, if I'm being honest.
Me too. We have we reached 60 degrees here today, which feels just amazing. So I hope some of that warm weather is going to come your way.
Yeah, if you can blow it this way to the East Coast, that would be nice. Yeah. So yeah, things are well. How is are you still in swim season?
Sure are. So, yeah, only a few meets left. We finish up about the middle of March, but it's starting to wind down. So nothing on the weekend schedule this past weekend, which was really strange.
That's very strange in the Klinkenbeard household, I think.
We had to fill it with some type of sport, so we went bowling last night, which we hadn't been bowling in a while. It was a lot of fun. I'm a horrible bowler, but I love bowling. So it was great to get the kids out there and have a little fun, play a couple hours, and play a couple games.
Well, that's good. That's good. I'm still in the midst of basketball season with my kids, so we're still going. We've got about another probably 6 weeks here of basketball season before we switch to our spring sports. But given talking about spring sports, we're going to talk baseball before we introduce our couple of guests that we have. First time we're going to have two guests on the show today, so excited to introduce them to our listeners. And we're going to chat a little bit of baseball, brought to you by 431sports.com. And I know that a couple of big news. Obviously, we've got spring training on the horizon. So let's kick it off with your thoughts on spring training.
Yeah, by the time we do our next episode in a couple weeks, every major league club will be in action spring training wise as far as pitchers and catchers reporting, the first workouts. So yeah, I mean you're talking February 9th is the first day any pitchers and catchers report. It's going to be the Chicago Cubs, and then about a week later, that's when you have full squad workouts. So things are going to ramp up here pretty quickly on the baseball side, and then you have games that soon follow once workouts begin. So it's almost like the season just gets ramped up very quickly once the players report to spring training, and then games get started, and then before you know it, we're right into the season. So you obviously have the two leagues, the Grapefruit League in Florida, the Cactus League in Arizona. I've had the pleasure. I've done both. I've done Florida. I've done Arizona. I've experienced them both. So I want to ask you first, which one would you rather go to? Would you be the Florida man, or would you head to the warm desert in Arizona?
No, I actually like the warm desert. Particularly sounds great right now, being in the Northeast here. But I've been to both Florida. I've been to Arizona. I've never done the spring training in either place, but I do like Arizona. I do like that dry heat. I said particularly as you get into the winter and the cold winters we have here. I think that's where my vote would go. I'd be going down, get on a plane and going down to Arizona would be the place for me, I think. What about yourself?
Yeah, what's great about Arizona is a lot of the facilities are newer, and it's also a little bit more compact, so you can see a lot more without having to drive so far, and everyone's pretty close knit in the Phoenix area. So I think that's one thing that Arizona definitely has going for it. But I don't know, I kind of like the beaches of Florida. I'm not gonna lie. I have to travel around a little bit more and hit the Gulf, hit the Atlantic coast, see both sides of it. But for me, it's kind of hard to pass up on the beaches of Florida. Seeing some baseball and then relaxing on the sand.
That's yeah. You know what? I don't think you can go wrong in either place. So it's I can certainly see that. And the other side, obviously, we've got the MLB The Show 25 coming out. Why don't you explain a little bit about this? I'm sure many of our younger youth sports listeners will know all about it, but there was obviously a change this year, which was new. So why don't we explain to our listeners about the MLB The Show 25?
Yeah, the big piece of baseball news was the Sony PlayStation game MLB The Show 25. And I mean, you say our younger athletes, but I mean, our coaches might be
Yeah,
dabbling in it
that's
a
true.
little bit as well. But no, that game, it's 20th anniversary, achieving that milestone. And for the first time in its history, it's going to have 3 cover athletes on that front cover. So all about the rising stars. You have Paul Skeens, you have Ellie De La Cruz, and you have Gunnar Henderson. So it's a big focus on 3 of the younger stars. You know that the kids today love watching, and I think it's great to really emphasize those younger stars. And I think it's something that baseball definitely should push more, are those younger players, and the younger stars that are coming up. So I know for me, I'm going to be out $70 come once the game launches, because my household's a Cincinnati Reds household. And when I told my son that Ellie De La Cruz was going to be on the cover, his eyes just lit up. And so I know I'll probably be shelling out the money for the game, since Ellie's on the cover. But it'll be well worth it, though.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. So we'll be gearing up for spring training. I know on our next episode and the ones following that, we'll certainly be getting more into spring training. We're going to flip gears a little bit back to our soccer side, brought to you by soccer.com. We've got 2 great guests from both inside the family here at Steel Sports. First joining us today is the VP of Player and Staff Development at Steel Sports, Ian Hughes. Ian has been with Steel Sports now for almost 7 years, and he is a UEFA Pro License coach, formerly working with the FAW, and has mentored many top names across the world of soccer in terms of their coaching. And Ian wrote a great article on coaching climate, which we're going to talk a little bit later. Ian, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks, Martin. Great to be here.
And also joining for a first for us, Nathan. We're only in season 2 here. We have a first. We do have another guest, 2 guests today, and it's somebody that everyone will recognize, a member of the Steel Sports Advisory Board, but known to everybody as Mr. NBC Premier League. Mr. Robbie Earle joins us. Robbie has played over 600 professional games, was named Player of the Decade for his main club, Wimbledon, in 2000, and also scored Jamaica's first ever World Cup Finals goal in 1998 against Croatia. So, Robbie, pleasure to be here. It's great to see you again. Thanks for joining us. And I know we're going to talk a little bit later about the great article Ian wrote in terms of coaching climate, because I also know it's kind of close to your heart.
Yeah.
But let's kick it off, and we kind of start with the Premier League. We have the expert here. Give us a little sense of what you saw over this weekend and the previous weekend. It's been a couple of weeks since we've been on air, so give us a couple of weeks' take.
Yeah, I mean, I think the first thing to say is it's no surprise that the Premier League is the most watched league in the world. Many would say the best football league in the world. When you just look at the set of results this weekend, there is almost a storyline beyond every result, whether it's Arsenal putting 5 past the reigning champions, whether it's Nottingham Forest scoring 7 goals, having got beat 5 last weekend, whether it's Everton, who don't score 4 goals in a game. They don't score 4 goals in 4 months, getting 4 goals in a match with David Moyes back. Southampton go away and get the first win, 2-1 against Ipswich. I mean, every result that was out there this weekend, you could almost say, Fulham going up to Newcastle, beating them at St. James's Park 2-1. They all were storylines, and is why there's such great appeal for the Premier League, because you just never know what might happen. I suppose we would be saying at this stage, Martin, and maybe a team close to your heart, that there's one team at the moment that seems to have the consistency that maybe some of the others haven't, that becomes less of a risk in saying that Liverpool are the standout operators at the moment. They've got a 6-point gap with an extra game to go. But what I would say about Liverpool, and it's interesting with this Liverpool team, is I'd almost say they're less swashbuckling than the Klopp Liverpool, but they're more controlled. There's more of a consistency, and they nullify the opposition probably better than many of the teams I've seen. They go to Bournemouth. It's a really difficult place to play at the moment. Bournemouth were on fire in terms of goals. And they go and almost sanitize Bournemouth to, 2 shots on target Bournemouth had. They rattle the post a couple of times, and they are dangerous, which you'd expect. But Liverpool just have a way of almost putting the fire blanket on the fire and putting the flames down. And then at the top end of the pitch, they've got a supreme finisher in Mo Salah, 21 Premier League goals, leading goal scorer. The combination of the calmness of the goal scoring, of a new manager coming in who seems to have just hit the right buttons for most of the players. Liverpool, you can't see them going too many games where, if they lost one, you don't see that might go to 3, 4 or 5 games. You can't see them losing many more games.
No, you're right. And Nathan will tell you it wouldn't be the Steel Sports show if I didn't talk about Liverpool at some point during the show. And I'm sure Ian, as an Evertonian, will love the fact that we talk about Liverpool on this show. But it was definitely coming off the loss at PSV and which obviously with a much changed side in the Champions League, having already finished first or second going into that game. It definitely was could have been a slippery game for the Bournemouth. Beating Forest the week before 5-0. They've been on 11 game unbeaten run, and it could be one of those that people got to look at and go, if they drop points there, they've got a little couple of tough games coming up. They've got to overturn the deficit against Spurs on Thursday in the League Cup. Man City in a couple of weeks at Everton, which is going to be the last side derby at Goodison Park. So that's not going to be an easy one. So it could have, but coming out, and I watched the game, and yes, Bournemouth had hit the post couple times. They hit Clive had that great chance, after he hit the post, and but it really you'd have thought I couldn't ever see them losing the game. If they conceded, I thought they would go up and score again and win the game. But it's definitely been a great season as a Liverpool fan.
Just on that point, Mark, I just wanted to bring in on this one, because you've got if you've got a group of players and you've got a football club like Liverpool and Jurgen Klopp and what he did and how he did it, and he was a special personality with a special intensity that he could bring to the football, and it was a great watch. But I'm interested in the coaching, like somebody like Arne Slot goes in, who's very different, does not try to be Klopp Mark II or any kind of 2.0. He's very much his own man, but it almost looks, Ian, as though he's taking a look at things, and in his own way, he's made little tweaks, but not anything big. And as a coach, sometimes I think we can fall into the trap of going into somewhere new and thinking, right, I've got to make this mine. I've got to put my twist on it. And I think the biggest thing Slot's done is not done that, not taken it so personally that he feels he has to, put his thing. Of course, these little tweaks, of course, his fingerprints are on it, and the football's a little different. But just in terms of the coaching, that's quite a brave thing to do, I would have thought.
It's brave, and it shows how he trusts himself. As you say, a lot of coaches, younger coaches, will go in and want to try and prove a point, try and embed their way of playing early on. But I think the word that comes to my mind is calmness in terms of what it used to be like, in terms of what it is now. And, he's very calm in how he speaks to the players. I'm fortunate to know a couple of people working at Liverpool, and those are the kind of words that they're using about him. Great man manager. He's calm. He's tweaked how they press from the front, which was Klopp's way of doing things. And when you think of Jurgen Klopp, you think of the press, right? The Gegen press. So he's tweaked that. So that's been really brave of him. But ultimately, some people would have thought it might take 4, 5, 6 months for these players to adapt, because they were with Klopp for so many years previously. But he's come in, he's been calm, he hasn't changed many things. And I think that demonstrates his bravery, that he's willing to take his time. And it's great for Liverpool as well, because yourself, if you don't win games in this league, you're not in a job. So Liverpool hierarchy is told, I would assume, Slot that he has time, to embed his things. He doesn't need to change things overnight. and he feels comfortable in the environment to be able to do it in phases. Some managers go in and try and change everything in phase one. I'm sure there'll be a phase 2 and phase 3 in terms of his game plan. But certainly phase 1 is definitely working for him.
And on that note, for both Robbie first and Ian, you just talked a little bit about, sure, Slot had time, to come in. He would have come in and he had time to do things. Do you feel that coaches coming into the Premier League these days, do you think they feel that they have time? I mean, there's lots of clubs that are changing managers quickly, and as well as I do, to embed your way of playing, unless you've got a squad like Liverpool that was obviously left in really good hands. Most times as a new manager, you're coming in and you haven't got the perfect situation, right? You've got the players that you want. You look at what Amarin's going through at United right now. So do you think that these managers do get enough time and these coaches do get enough time in the Premier League these days with the stakes on the line?
As a rule, I would say no. I think Amarin is almost special circumstances. We're on 10 plus years since Sir Alex Ferguson days, 2013 last title win. So I think because poor recruitment, poor management, poor running of the football club has left them in this situation. He's in a unique position where I almost feel he's got a free, and I'm going to say free-ish hand till the end of the season. But by the way, they don't start winning a few games, things will turn. Yeah. Football fans want to see games won. Ownership group want to see games. You have to still have an element of progression. You have to still have an element of, okay, that bit's working. I understand that isn't. At the moment for Manchester United, not much is working. When you're throwing Kobe Mainoo up front with 2 strikers on the bench and 2 young number 10s underneath, that's not a sign that things are going in the right direction. So I think generally coaches don't get the relevant time, and that's where I think on the Slot, as Ian says, is probably got a belief and confidence in who he is and how he's going to do things, because he didn't feel he had to come in and do too much, and Liverpool have benefited from that. I thought, the Klopp Liverpool were probably more emotional. There was definitely more drama around the games. I think there's a composure to them now. I think they understand at times a game can be won. I think they've won 6 or 7 games now this season, 2-0, which I think is a brilliant scoreline for a coach. You've kept a clean sheet. You've got your 2 goals from your strikers with Mo Salah and the Gakpos and Diaz's and that, and you've kept things calm and you've not had a lot of drama. And that's what Liverpool have been about this season. So for new coaches going in, the Premier League is such a beast to get used to. It's so different from any other league in terms of the speed, the intensity, the physicality, the never say die attitude. If you're playing Southampton, Ipswich or Leicester, don't take that as a gimme in this league. Maybe in German league or Italian league or Spanish league, the bottom teams, they go to the big teams. Here, nothing of the sort. And so I think a coach has to be aware of those things coming into a new league, and especially for the foreign coaches, it's something I don't think they quite understand till they're in it.
I think on that, Robbie, as well, it's a great point. When you played, I think the coach was king, right? The club had to adapt to the way the coach wanted to play and do things. And I think you look at the clubs now in the Premier League, it's vice versa. The coach now, the head coach, has to adapt to the methodology, the game model, and the way the club wants to do things. So firing a coach these days is a lot easier because the methodology stays the same, the way of playing stays the same, the game model, everything stays the same, and a new coach just steps in, and it's an easier transition. Whereas when you tell me when you were playing for Wimbledon, I'm sure Joe Kinnear was the king, and if Joe Kinnear left, it would have caused a lot of uproar.
It tumbled. Well, the team got relegated the year after he left. That's exactly it. And it was exactly the case. The Sir Alex Ferguson era, they weren't just the manager. They were the manager, the chief scout, the head coach, the analyses. They had their fingerprints on everything. And that's why that era of coach was unique in some ways. And I think there's a few hybrid type coaches now. I think Pep tries to do a little bit of both. It looks to me like Amarin is trying to do that in Manchester United, have a little foot in a few more camps than just the head coach camp. But Ian's exactly right. Back in the day, that manager, the gaffer, you'd call him back in the day. He pretty much ran the business, and if he left, often the business fell apart.
Well, and I think you're seeing that with some of the smaller, so-called smaller clubs in the Premier League, right? Brighton's a great example. They've gone through, from Potter to De Zerbi, to Hurtzler, it's been the same. The way they're playing is the same. I think Bournemouth, which is Nathan's adopted club. Nathan has taken them on as his Premier League team. We don't need to talk about Saturday much, Nathan. So I think you're definitely seeing that, and I think that's one of the issues that United have had over the course of the year is that Ferguson was such the man, and as you said, the gaffer of everything. They just haven't got a way of playing. I mean, I've said for a while now, I don't know what United's style of play what it's been over numerous managers. Managers that we have, obviously big names. Van Gaal, Mourinho, those managers that were there. I just don't see what their style of play was, and I think they're seeing the as you said, the years and years now of kind of poor recruitment and not having that methodology, game model, and a way of playing. But and it's interesting, turning a little bit. You talk about Pep. Obviously, City have had a torrid season by their standards. They're still sitting, I think, fifth in the fourth or fifth in the Premier League. But as their standards, what do you? I mean, he's been there almost 9 years, I think. Now, Pep. There's no sign that he's going anywhere anytime soon. Obviously, signing an extension. But what do you, when you look at the City team now, Rob, and the season they've had, where do you see that their downfall has come? Is it been a little bit too long? Is it stale? Is it a lack of?
I think there's a number of things, including injuries, which generally over the course of seasons they've been pretty good. Pep tends to go with a smaller squad than most people in the past, which again has served him well when he's won Champions Leagues and titles, etc. So it's somewhat difficult to kind of say that this is the reason. But I think a combination of the injuries, of the Rodri being a big important part. There's a lack of athleticism in the midfield. There's an aging out of players who've come together who are all hitting a 30-ish at the wrong time together. There's sometimes, and he'll talk, there's a chemistry sometimes in the dressing room that has a certain cycle. And I think what Sir Alex back in the day was very clever at, he'd take 2 or 3 big stars out, 2 or 3 different that come in. That changes the whole makeup of the dressing room. I'm not sure Pep's been the same. And so I think we'll see a little bit of a turnaround this summer, and maybe some of the bigger names who we've known, the Kevin De Bruyne's maybe of the past, will be moving on. Edison, possibly the goalkeeper. And right now, I just feel like it, and it was funny. We were doing the Two Goalies podcast, me and Mr. Musto, the weekend, and I always said, like, Man City remind me of a great boxing champion. I'm talking like a Muhammad Ali or a Mike Tyson, who start coming to the end, and they've still got a big punch in them, but the punch resistance is gone. And if they get hit, like I thought at 1-1, the game at the weekend, so Arsenal go up after a couple of minutes. City get back in the game through Haaland. Now, in the past, when City would have got back, Arsenal would have been on, let's get back and defend, let's stay in the game, let's not let City go. It was complete opposite. The moment that City scored, Arsenal went again, and within a minute, a 2-1 up and 3-1 up, and then the game's theirs. And that wouldn't have happened to City in the past. So there's something there that's a frailty that comes with age, maybe comes with, I wouldn't say complacency, because that's the wrong word, but just of being in a group together and digging deep. There's so many times you can go to the well, and I kind of feel like Man City, this great group who or some of the players are going to be in Hall of Fame, best we've ever had in the league. But I just feel that sort of group and that era is coming to an end.
Robbie, so just a quick one. No, an interesting one on that. Obviously, I thought Manchester City would come up on the podcast, so I looked at what may be some reasons. Do you think that the Euro 2024 and the Copa America took part last summer? You're talking of injuries, and I know you played in the World Cup yourself, so great insight from you. Did you find playing in a summer tournament and then coming back to the Premier League difficult mentally and physically, and do you think that could be playing into anything?
Yeah, that's a good point. I certainly think for the likes of the top players, the Phil Foden, some of the players who were the Argentinian, Brazilian players who were playing in the Copa Americas and some of the South American competitions. Some of these guys had maybe 3-4 weeks of so-called rest, and then you're back into a season. Now, I think the difference, Ian, from back in my time, we took you 98. It was a great summer. It was brilliant to be involved in. I still managed to get 5 weeks or so of rest, and then the club were really good and set me up like a little bit of a special pre-season for me. So I didn't do did a lot of private work with an athletic coach and got myself in good shape, so I was ready to go. And what I would say, possibly some differences, and maybe I think some of the things that people don't understand, and I only really truly appreciate this when we fortunately go to England, maybe at the start of the season, the end of the season, to watch a number of games and see the start and conclusion of the league. And it is frightening when you are pitch side, which we often are privileged to be. The speed and intensity and power of this game is incredible. It's another game to what I played. And so when you've got players playing to the maximum for that length of time, let's remember, I don't think VAR helps with a lot of stoppages. So, these highly tuned, muscled athletes are playing at full speed, and then you can be standing around for 3 or 4 minutes. The length of time now, how many times have we seen 8, 9, 10 minutes added onto a game? I mean, eventually these things take their toll. Now, I just think that the body of a modern day footballer can't take that amount of workload, with the summers becoming less and less time off, and then the length of time and the intensity of the Premier League. I just think we've got to be careful with some of the players, because the players are breaking down, and we all want to see the top players, the top games played at the best level it can be. And I just think we've got to be careful. There's this new World Club Cup coming in summer. It's June, July. Then these pre-season tournaments. Everybody has to fly off and go and earn their money. And we start the season again. And, next year, we start World Cup qualifiers and things. So, for the modern day footballer, they're very well paid and they have a great life. But there's a real toll on the body that I think we have to be a little bit careful with.
Yeah, do you think, last kind of question on the Premier League kind of roundup, Ian, is for you in terms of the coaching. If you look at City, you look at Pep, there's definitely been an evolution, I think, in the style. Do you think that has come with him, changing his style? Do you think he's adapting to the players that he's got, or is he adapting to the opposition more? Has it moved on? Because you don't see those little inside left, inside right runs hitting the byline cut as much as you did, 3, 4, 5 years ago. It's a little bit different now. As Haaland maybe has changed that, I don't know. But what's your take in seeing them, from a coaching perspective?
Yeah, I think, listen, I mean, Pep will always have his principles and his framework of how to play, and he's, for his career, has looked to get his best players into something we call the half space, which isn't a wide area and isn't in the middle of the field. It's that half space in between. So when he was at Barcelona, it was always Xavi and Iniesta, central midfielders that used to play in those half spaces, in those places that are difficult to pick up and mark players in. He then went to Bayern Munich. His best players were Robben and Ribéry, who were wider players. And then so he got those coming inside into those spaces. It wasn't midfielders in there anymore. It was wingers who came in. Then he went to Manchester City. His best players were De Bruyne and Silva. And so what he did was he got those players as central midfielders again playing in those spaces. So the half space is massive in his philosophy and the way he wants to play. Trends obviously come and go in the game. But, there's more goals scored from cutbacks now than crosses ever used to be. There's a few years ago, there was more crosses played into the box from central midfielders who found themselves in wider positions in comparison to fullbacks, right? So where you'd assume as a coach, if I was a coach, I would have my central midfielders passing the ball out to my fullbacks during a practice, and my fullbacks would be crossing it. That's how we would usually generally think about how a team would play. But Pep changed all that, and then you think of people like Toni Kroos as well, who always ended up in wider spaces, crossing the ball as central midfielders. So as coaches, we need to keep up with modern trends. If we have a fantastic central midfield player who we feel could go and make it professionally, if they can't cross the ball, the chances are they're not going to make it to the top because that's what the trends are saying, right? So in that half space kind of position. So I think Pep is usually, he doesn't follow the trends, he sets the trends, right? And he has to change the way he plays so often from ear to ear, albeit his principles stay the same, and his principles of play is similar. And then how he adapts that, he tries to stay ahead of the game, which he hasn't quite done this year because you look at Liverpool, who's come in with a fresh way of playing, and some other clubs. But I don't know what you, Robbie, feel about, the way the evolution of the coach and from Pep's perspective.
Yeah, I mean, what Pep's a disruptor, so he comes with it a way that he probably started the goalkeeper playing out from the back. Almost the goalkeeper's become a centre back. He brought inverted fullbacks into midfield to start to get overload so that we get an extra number higher up the pitch. He brought us a false 9 when everybody said you'd need a 20-goal centre forward to win a title. He played De Bruyne, he played Foden, often as a false 9 and worked people another way. So he got extra numbers in midfield. And then often the wide players, Phil Foden and the likes Bernardo Silva with the threats in behind. So he's constantly revolving and evolving his way, and he's an innovator, he's a disruptor. I said there'll be a time when Pep won't play a goalkeeper. Back in the day, as kids used to play rush goalkeeper, whoever was the furthest guy back. Yeah. He'll almost play people out because on the basis that if you keep the ball, they can't shoot in your goal, and he'll do that. But what does interest me, and then I know as we move on to maybe in the coaching, I just wonder from your position as heading a coaching facility, working with coaches, what's kind of filtering down to the kids level, and how important is it that the coaches you're working with are kind of aware and open to the change in what we're seeing with modern football? The old 4-4-2 is kind of dinosaur now.
Yeah, do you know, the old 4-4-2 is dinosaur. I watched Leicester City play Everton on the weekend. Remember them winning the title playing 4-4-2 about 10 years ago. But in terms of what's filtering down, I think it's important that our coaches and all coaches have an open mind. The amount of times I speak to coaches about things that are happening in the Premier League, and they go, well, I'm not coaching in the Premier League. That doesn't affect me. A perfect example was when Wales played the box midfield in Euro 2016. Yeah, I came over to America. The first formation I played against was the box 4 in midfield with my younger team. So, it's really important to keep up with modern trends. What I'm seeing is the adaptability of players these days at the top level. Gone are the days you're either, you're box to box. That doesn't really work. You're either playing as a 6, a defensive midfielder, or an attacking midfielder. And someone like Aaron Ramsey has to play both. Yeah, he can play as a 6 and he can play as a 10. I can see in a lot more players now being adaptable to be able to play in 3 or 4 different positions. And that's what we tell our players. We've got a national program for our best players. And ultimately that player might not get into the national team in what they would perceive as their regular position. It's our duty and job as coaches to see whether they can fit in another position. So it's making sure, we give all players experiences of doing that. And as coaches, we're open-minded enough to understand that just because a player says he's a defender at the age of 10, like, who's told you you're a defender? You're 10, right? So let's try you as a forward and as a winger to see where your position actually is. So I think, variety is really important at a young age.
And switching gears, obviously, Robbie, you've been a key part of the NBC broadcast for, over a decade now, and since the NBC, got the rights to the Premier League. In fact, a lot of our younger Steel Sports athletes probably know you more from what you do on USA and NBC than maybe your Wimbledon days. So, can you give them a little bit of an insight of how do you approach analyzing and breaking down the game for an American audience? Especially obviously we've got a lot of new fans to the Premier League and to the sport.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good point. I think the biggest challenge we have is a broadcast team broadcasting the Premier League rights across the country is that you have a real spectrum of viewer, from the coach, player, ex-player, people who've known the game for a long time and understand it intimately, to new people might be watching the first or second game and still want to be entertained and educated. So it's a matter of finding the right balance, using the right terminology. We like to look wherever we can to do breakdowns of play, phases of play, and kind of explain to the viewer what's happening here. So the Arsenal corner kicks, for example, is an art form that's been set up where they basically put a wall of 3 players around the goalkeeper, stop the goalkeeper coming out. They work at what they call a pick in basketball. Somebody blocks off. Gabriel comes in and heads the ball. Now, when you see that live in action and you've not got a trained eye, it looks a bit of a mess and one guy heads the ball in. But when you can break down the detail and show that that's been practiced and they've got a number of set routines, which is a little more akin to NFL in a strange way, where every player is sort of choreographed and everybody knows their roles. Which is really interesting, where a lot of that's starting, I feel, to come into football now. So the set-piece coach is becoming a really important part of a manager's group now in terms of getting goals. So breakdowns, I think, are a really good way of trying to show the viewer what's happening beyond what they can see. It's often putting yourself in that position. So, the ball comes flying across to Mo Salah and he smashes it over the bar, and everyone goes, "Oh, how can the Mo Salah do that?" And you kind of go, "Well, you know what? I was that guy 20 years ago, smashed him over the ball all the time. And this is the reason why, because I wasn't concentrating on the ball. My head wasn't down. I'm already celebrating before I've hit the ball. I'm, making the wrong contacts." You can, by inserting yourself in there and actually explaining what can be the jeopardy and sometimes what are the solutions, helps people to understand why things are happening on the pitch. So it's really about simplifying the game, trying to educate without alienate is a phrase that we were told. So bring people into the game and try and get them to understand more about it, but don't talk in a language where people can't feel that they're part of the conversation. So it's been a great journey. It continues to grow. More and more kids are getting into game, and I still feel, I know we've had a few talks late night over an odd beer saying, I still feel there's a connection somewhere between youth football in America and watching Premier League highlights. And if you're a right-sided player right now, an attacking player who wants to score goals, you should be able to watch Mo Salah and learn things about what Mo Salah does. If you're a midfield player who wants to be a creative force, and as Ian says, be that guy who often drifts out in the wide position and is crossing balls. Kevin De Bruyne has been doing that better than anybody in world football for the last 6-7 years. There's somehow we need also to find a better job and a better way of kind of finding little packages of players play that youngsters can go and watch and see and learn and put themselves in that position. Because often that's what, I remember as a kid, back in the day, you'd have match of the day and I'd sit and watch it and record it and watch it back again just to see things that I might learn, that I might improve on. And I'd like to feel that this new brand of American soccer football players, male and female, are growing with the game. And I think the more we can help them to grow in their journey, the better.
It's without a doubt. I mean, I remember I came to the US in 2001. I remember watching the 2002 the Japan South Korea World Cup on some Spanish channel with rabbit ears, coat hanger on the back of the TV. Couldn't get it anywhere else in the middle of one, and you didn't see any Premier League stuff anywhere. Now you can't walk in most cities and most places without seeing the Chelsea shirt, the Newcastle shirt, the Arsenal shirt, the City shirt, United, and it's definitely shown how much it's grown over the last 25 years since I've been in the US.
Yeah.
Hey Robbie, I think this would be great for our listeners, our viewers, because I don't think they understand what goes into on your side, on the podcasting side, and what goes into preparing for a match day, and being on TV, and especially for some of our athletes who may want to do this as a career in the future. If you could walk us through, a typical day as far as getting ready to go on air.
Well, let me I'll take that back and give you a typical week of how a week starts. So many people will think at 7 a.m. on the East Coast, 4 a.m. on the West Coast, you're sitting in front of the studio, Rebecca's ready, and that's all you've done. And you probably got to look at least 4 or 5 days prior to that, to when the sort of job starts to get ready for that show going live at 7 a.m. Eastern time on the morning. So if it's a Monday night, as it is tonight, there's a Monday night game. On Tuesday, we'll get a full breakdown of the weekend's actions, the big storylines, the injuries, the gossip, the news, the transfers that are happening now, players going in and out. So we kind of, by Tuesday, Wednesday, we've got a full background of what's happened from the past week. From Wednesday on, we start to look forward to what's going to happen the coming week. We have a Thursday call that we've been having for 10 years. It is a 1.5 hour call every Thursday that reviews the shows from the week past, looks forward, previews the shows from the week coming. We start to talk about what are the big storylines, what might we be thinking about, talking about. We have a stat pack that gets sent out on a Thursday evening. So that's your Thursday night reading done. Friday's a full day of prep. We get all the managers' press conferences. So you got to listen to the press conferences, see what he's saying, who's playing, who's fit, who's not. And so by Saturday morning, you're prepped, you're ready to go. It's like an exam, you're ready to go. So while Rebecca Lowe, who's the best in the business at doing it, is poised and ready to hit you with a few hard questions. You know, Robbie, Tim, and myself, we've done a lot of background work. And the funniest thing of it all, and it's one thing that one of our bosses says, that 80% of what we've studied and researched and reviewed won't be used. But you have to have that in the case of recently there was an Everton-Liverpool game that was cancelled, and we have to go on air, and we got to go on air for 45 minutes and talk Premier League. Well, when you've done the kind of work we've done, we've got storylines. We're ready to go. We're probably the only people who are slightly happy that we got an extra 45 minutes in the game not being played. So there is a lot more to it. It's not. It's a full-time job basically, and if you want to do it properly and you want to be committed, then that's the kind of investment you've got to put into it. And you know, you get your rewards. And often I say to people that the best thing for us is every week the stories in the games. I don't have to look for the stories. I'm not looking, what am I going to talk about? My job is to find the story, present the story, put the arguments, give people the options, and let them make their own choices and decisions. And so, you know, NBC have done a brilliant job of that. They're very authentic. You won't hear any of the upper 90s and this PKs, and you know, it's almost as though this show could stand alone in the UK with the match of the days and the Sky Sports, and it could hold its own in terms of the quality and the depth of analysis.
The easy part's when the light comes on the camera and you're ready.
Yeah. You're like you better be ready, because these are, you know, often a few million people on a big game waiting for you to see what you say. So, and it's really funny. The funny thing, just very quickly, is that I travel from east to west coast generally to do the shows, and sometimes I'll be on a plane or be in an airport, and people just start talking to you like they know you. And it's because they've seen you on the screen in their living room at 7 a.m. in the morning when they're having a cup of tea and a piece of toast, and you're in a way part of the extended family. So they just start talking to you like, oh yeah, remember about Arsenal? No. And you sometimes go, yeah, I don't even know who you are. We don't even exchange names, but I get it. And I know it's your team, so we're going to talk Arsenal now. I have to talk Arsenal for 20 minutes.
Before we get to talk a little bit about it in Ian's article and some coaching climate, the last question I had on the broadcasting side was, obviously the Premier League announced the conclusion of their partnership with the IMG after the 25-26 season, which is their production side, and they want to obviously establish an in-house media operation, you know, potentially kind of leading to that Netflix of football kind of streaming model. Do you see, in terms of the broadcast world, that's the direction that it looks like it's going to be heading? And do you think that's something that will only happen in the UK? Do you think it's something that will happen globally for the Premier League?
It's a good question. I think the Premier League want to take more ownership of their own rights. I think they believe they've now learned and have got the setup to produce as much content as people need. I still feel that Possibly in the UK, it might happen. I wouldn't be surprised to see the 3 o'clock game. So at the moment, the 10 a.m. game here, 3 p.m. back in the UK is not shown in the UK. That's blacked out. I think that will change. I think that's coming. I think everywhere else in the world you can see that game. So I'm not sure why in England. And I think that's a new revenue stream that the Premier League clubs would enjoy, that one of the OTT and Netflix or Amazon or somebody might decide they want that slot. I do think that it will become a global thing where I feel that people like NBC still have a role to play, is that we now, after 10 years, and have got to understand our audience and our audience know us. And there's something in that we broadcast for an American audience. The Sky TV in the UK broadcast to a UK audience. And I think they're very different. And I think there's something in that you feel you know the people and there's a relationship and we're talking to the same people each week. So I still think that there'll be pockets around the world, broadcasters who'll be partners maybe with the Premier League, who'll deliver their content. Whether some of the games will be, centralised from the UK and we'll get some of their commentators. But NBC have always liked to have our own presenters. So when the Super Bowl's on, we can make references to Super Bowl. When, we understand Thanksgiving's an important part, July the 4th. I think these nuances about the American broadcast that are important to American audience. And I think if you just had one sort of flat global presentation, you lose a bit of that intimacy. And I don't think people would quite feel it's the same broadcast.
Yeah, no, I would agree with that. And changing it, Ian, I want to bring you in and talk a little bit about the article that you wrote, which I really enjoyed, reading. Certainly it was a quick read, but it was real personal. Talking about your starting playing football in Wales, then going on into your coaching career and things that you did, and then obviously looking at your dissertation, focusing on the perceived coaching climate. So talk a little bit about the article. What led you to writing about that, and then we're going to certainly have a chat a little bit about the coaching and then youth sports, and get Robbie's take on what he's seeing in the youth side in the US since he's been here.
Yeah, thanks, Martin, and thanks for having me on to discuss the article. It's something that's quite close to my heart. I started coaching when I was 14, and as a young coach, I wanted to impress everyone. So what I did, I coached summer camps, and then I started coaching my local soccer team at the age of 17, and I wanted to be successful. So I went out and I went on Anglesey. I found the best players I could. I brought this super team together to win things, which we did. And then I perceived that to be success. Then I went to university, into college, and my dissertation was about enjoyment, player enjoyment based on the environment the coach creates, the coaching climate, and found that I was probably doing everything wrong. And then since then, I've looked at those super players that I had, but they were 14 and 15 at the time. And I followed their journeys into senior soccer. And to think I had the best players, not many went on to become great players within the senior game because they didn't really understand what failure was and how to lose because they were used to winning. I hadn't set them up properly to be comfortable in developing themselves rather than wanting to win games. So my dissertation says that there's many different types of coaching climates. The two main ones, without going too deep, a task, which is all based on improvement, is all based on individuals within that practice, and individuals being on their own development pathway, right? In terms of competition, I remember back in the day, I always used to say, whoever does this first wins. There's 18 players on the field doing what you're asking them to do. There's only one winner. When you put a practice on and say, whoever touches the ball more times than anyone else in 30 seconds wins, that means you've got 17 players that didn't win and you have one that did win. So then looking at the motivational climate now, working with steel coaches, it's important to say, can you beat your previous score? It's all about the individual and improving the individual rather than being the best. And many coaching climate research articles out there will tell you the same, that the dropout is based on what happens when players don't win anymore. What happens when they feel success is only when they win. What happens when they stop winning? They don't feel successful, their confidence levels decrease, and they end up dropping out of the game. So it's our responsibility as coaches to ensure we create the right environment for all of our players. And that's understanding each individual player you're working with, granted. But the dissertation said that if the coach embeds and implements a task-orientated environment, talking about performance rather than results, talking about individual improvement, talking about each individual goal setting with players and having accountability with those players that you're working with, everyone can thrive in that environment. Only the top 2% can thrive in an ego-orientated environment that focuses on winning and being the best. Now, I would suggest if you are in the professional game, that's what you might do with some of your players at a higher level, because that's what you need. You only need the 1 or 2% that will go into your first team and become a professional. But ultimately, my responsibility when I was younger, and still is now, is to enrich the lives of all these players on and off the field, which is why, since I came in 2018, we've embedded a task-orientated coaching climate, making sure all of our coaches, cater to all of our players' needs, not just the top 2%.
Yeah, and Rob, bringing you on this, I mean, you played, in the late 90s for a coach that was probably much ahead of his time almost, and to Ian's point, created a culture about team. So, can you talk a little bit about your experience with what Ian has talked about in his article and how that came about with Wimbledon and that focus with Joe as your coach?
Yeah, I think it plays into what Ian's saying in terms of, when we went to a club like Wimbledon, it certainly wasn't about the one individual. It certainly wasn't about the best player. It was about the group and the environment, and not sort of playing your part and not letting your teammates down. And so we had this kind of bond. It was it was an incredible bond that even to this day, we've got a WhatsApp group. There's 20 odd players on this WhatsApp group who played 20, 30 years ago. And that wasn't because anybody was wanting to be bigger or a better name or anything than anybody else. It was about understanding that we were only as strong as our weakest link, and everybody had to have each other's back, and everybody had to play at their best for the team to do well. And so there was no star individual. We rarely had anyone who was in the play. We never had anyone who was in the team of the year and individuals or player of the year and the such like. But if there was one for team of the year, I would have said we would have been in the top 3 of that for many of the seasons, because we came at it with a very different outlook and a different approach. And I think to Ian's point as well, you can find added success when it becomes a group thing and not just an individual thing. When you collectively go 1-0 down, but look around your teammates and go, we got this, we're okay, and end up winning 2-1, 3-1, it can give you a feeling. We were 2-0, we were 3-0 down at West Ham United in the mid-90s. Again, you can end up beating them 4-3. At half-time, Joe Kinnear said, we score one early, we'll win the game. And we were all looking at him a bit like, that's Joe speak. Afinakuko goes out and scores early on, 3-1. Gailey scores 3-2, 3-3. All of a sudden, Jason Ewell gets a winner, 4-3. And those are the things, that's when you feel like your coaching environment and your team environment must be right, because everybody is bought into it. And if we'd have lost, by the way, if we'd ended up losing 3-2, that would have been okay, because everybody thought at half time, we're going out and we're going to win. And that's what that kind of environment can do, and how healthy that environment can be.
And obviously, from that coaching climate, the balance between kind of fun and competition, seems to be kind of a tipping point for many kids, quitting, soccer in this country. So what would the message, Ian, be to the parents and the athletes that might be listening, how they can foster a more positive and development-focused environment so they're not just thinking, kids like to win, right? Everybody likes to win. But how can they adjust that mentality to focus on those things so they get a more enriched experience of playing and hopefully have a prolonged career in sports, whether that's going on to coach or staying involved in the game in some way over time?
Yeah, I mean, the great Tommy Lasorda, who I know was an inspiration for us at Steel, said, didn't he, the problem with success is that it does not teach you how to deal with failure. So, how we as coaches deal with failure is how the players will deal with failure. So if and I say failure, I mean losing a game. Now, you could see that sometimes losing a game, if you frame it right, can be a successful thing if you learn from it, right? So, for example, I would rather, for long-term player development, I would rather lose a game 1-0 and the performance be really good than win a game 1-0 and our performance be poor. Because over the longer term, if our performances are right and we're doing things and we're improving, over the longer term, we're going to win more games than we lose. So that's the first thing, is not only to look at the result. The result is a byproduct of what you do, but it's the performance that's important. So being able to look at the performance of your own performance as a player, or if you're a coach, observing the team's performance, that's what should determine, if you're going to be happy, not the result. Because if you get guided by the result too often, there are times where you can't control certain things during a game. You may lose the game 1-0 and the referee, the official, gives a penalty in the last minute and they score. But you've done 9 things out of 10 really well. As a coach and as players, you need to be positive and see that as a success, right? So that's the important thing as coaches and players, of framing things correctly. The other thing, Martin, you mentioned, it's the perceived coaching climate. So as a coach, I'll try and embed a coaching climate and a positive, task environment to my players. But it's what the players perceive it to be, that's the important thing. Yeah. So regular check-ins with parents, regular check-ins with kids and players to ensure that they understand and they can see that the climate you are trying to create is the one that's being perceived by the players. It's your terminology. It's how you frame things as coaches that is super important. And as players, I will always say the first thing everyone has to do is play with a smile on their face. Because the time we don't smile, whether we're winning or losing, is a time we need to reassess things. So we want to make sure every Steel player that goes to practice wakes up with a smile on their face that morning, because they know they've got a Steel practice, the environment's correct, and they're going to see their friends and have fun. Everything else is a bonus, right? But we got to make sure that when our kids turn up and wake up in the morning, there's a smile on their face because they're ready for practice that evening.
Ian, you brought up parents, and I wanted to ask you about managing parent expectations, because a lot of times parents want to win more than the kids do, more than the players win. So what advice do you give coaches when talking about just managing those parent expectations?
Yeah, well, one of our national rituals is the end of game debrief, where we bring all of our parents in with our players. So the parents need to understand what we've tried to do and what we've tried to do within any performance or game. So the first thing is our parents should be our biggest supporters in terms of developing their kids. We're trying to facilitate and support each other to make sure their kids and our kids, I would say they're our kids too, right, have a positive experience within the game. I remember when I started with a team up here a few years ago, a really successful team, but they never played out of the back. The goalkeeper always kicked the ball. But the 2 central defenders wanted to go and play in college. Well, to play in college, you need to be able to play out from the back and be comfortable on the ball. So I brought the parents in and the players in and said, we're going to concede goals, by the way, because we're going to play out. We're going to make mistakes. But it's my responsibility and duty to give these players the best opportunity to play in college because they're successful and that's what they want to do. I could allow the goalkeeper to punt the ball up the field again, as always, and maybe win more games than what we would, but I'm doing a disservice to the players. So we have to all be on the same page that we need to play out to give every player on the field an opportunity to get comfortable on the ball. We lost games. Some games, not all games. We lost a few games and we conceded a few goals. But what was successful for me was when a player came over to me, a central defender made a mistake, got caught on the ball, and they scored. After the game, I spoke to that player. I said, hey, he came over and apologized. I said, don't apologize, it's my fault. So coaches need to take ownership sometimes and accountability. No, I've asked you to do that. So that's on me. But the player turned around and said, yeah, but there's no way we're going back to how we used to punt the ball up the field. I'm getting the ball again in the next game and continuing to play out. So at that stage, I knew that the players and parents were on our side. And it's about patience. And it's about trusting the process and trusting everything we do at Steel is in the best interest of every player on the field.
Yeah, and Rob, you've as we kind of wind up here, you've been in the US now, based here for over a decade, and you've coached here as well. I know many people don't know you're an A-licensed coach yourself. You're very passionate about the youth football in this country. You had a club at a time as well in California. So, what have you noticed over the last kind of time that you've been here, this last decade or so, and where do you think the future is in terms of youth soccer in this country, and the this kind of tipping point that we're seeing of competition and winning, and that Ian talks about moving forward over the next 10 years or so?
I think, first of all, to Nathan's point, I think the parents are one of the big challenges for youth sport generally. Tempering expectations, understanding what's being done, buying into what coaches are doing and how they're working. I think there's a whole parent education piece that's really important. This kind of always wanting to be the best player, or the best one to get to college, or the best one who's going to go into MLS. I think we've got to sort of try and change the climate of how people are coming into game and what they're expecting. Where I think there's huge opportunities, and I see it locally, and I go to watch games still, and involved with a little bit of a community college. There's a group of kids who are coming through now who are what I would, maybe in America they call them soccer specific kids, who are only playing football, who aren't doing the baseball, aren't doing the basketball, but more are getting to an age where they're focusing in on football, as we would in Europe back in the day when we were maybe similar age, teenagers, starting to think about the game. And so that creates great opportunities, and people are more dedicated to the sport than the 10 years when I first came to this country, when some of my best players will be playing baseball one season and other things, lacrosse and other sport, basketball, and then they come for a few weeks and play football. So I think the climate is changing. I think there's a whole coach education piece that is growing, but still needs to be worked on. I think the levels of what we're teaching these kids, we have to make sure we keep on pushing the barrier up and taking the benchmark even higher. But I'm excited by American football. I must admit, the participation, boys and girls, the quality, the levels of football that's being played. I think there's a lot to look forward to, and I think it's a huge area. Obviously, with Steel Sports are very much at the heart of that. But I think it's a huge opportunity. I've got friends in England who I'm saying, and I don't know how I can be saying this after 10 years, America could win a World Cup before England.
That's a bold statement. It's
a hugely bold statement. There's a generation of kids who are 14, 15 years of age now who are on par with what I've seen in English academies. Now, how we develop those kids over the next 5 to 10 years is going to be the key input. But the base level of some of these kids are getting to the base levels of kids around the world. And that's where the game has grown, and people like Ian's work has taken us to that stage, but it's how we take on that next level.
And Robbie, as a Welshman, I can't endorse your comments enough. Let's hope the US win a World Cup before England.
They'll still have to win one before Wales do, I think. But I want to thank you guys as we finish off with our stat of the day. We like to finish the show with our stat of the day. And I did find one on kind of this topic, really. And the statistic is 53% and 31%. That is research that indicates that between 8th and 12th grade, the attrition rate in soccer in the US is 53% for girls and 31% for boys. I think we all would agree that is too high, for everything that's going on. But Ian, thank you for joining us. It's great to have you here talking about our steel coaches. And you oversee a lot of steel coaches around the country, and I appreciate your time. And Robbie, as always, I really appreciate your time. Really proud to have you as part of our Steel Sports advisory board, and appreciate all the work that you do with the kids for Steel Sports around the country. And Nathan, we will see you next week. For 2 weeks. Thank you for listening, and we will see everybody soon. Thanks very much, and take care. Thanks again, guys. Appreciate it.
Thanks, guys.
Cheers. Bye.